Nashville Predators are in the playoffs, and today I'm going to give you 3 reasons that they could be a team that contends for the Stanley Cup on today's Locked On Predators podcast.
Your Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On Predators podcast your first listen of the day. Every single day, we are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, want to start a special shout out to our loyal Locked On Pred heads out there, the everydayers who tune into every single show. We love you guys, and we appreciate the support you give us week in and week out. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer at Penalty Box Radio. Normally, I have a partner in crime, but Ann Kimmel has the day off. A big show today for the Locked On Predators podcast. Where the Predators have made the playoffs. Yay! That's half the battle for this season. And now that they're in, we're going to talk about 3 reasons the Nashville Predators could contend for a Stanley Cup. Yeah, I think it might happen. Plus, a little bit of drama in the desert. It sounds like the Arizona Coyotes could be moving to Salt Lake City next year. So as a Predators fan, as somebody who has been through relocation drama before, I have some thoughts on the situation. A little bit of a bittersweet thing for the NHL, I think. So we'll get into that coming up a little bit later on the show. I want to start by saying today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. And that's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. So visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Terms and conditions apply. So this is my first show since the Nashville Predators clinched their playoff berth. Thank you, weird work schedule that's causing Ann and I to not be able to do shows together. Yeah, and this is such a crazy playoff berth for the Nashville Predators. Yeah, it's going to be one where they get it's another one where they get in by the skin of their teeth and get to the first round of the playoff and, kind of be the underdog there. One of those situations that everybody in Nashville wanted to avoid when they started to rebuild, retool, whatever it is. It just hits a little bit differently this year, doesn't it? Just because the expectations were just way different begin the season, sneaking into the playoffs now, like with this year, this team, as opposed to, let's say 2 years ago when, you invested all this money in Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson and, you made all these moves and, the Mikael Granlund trade, you made all these moves to be a contender. It hits a little bit different with this team. I also think that there's a lot of people that maybe don't recognize just the historical context of what the Nashville Predators have been able to do this season. You got to remember, they started off 5-10, which in alone is a pretty good comeback. I get it that's right in the middle of the season, or right at the beginning of the season. There's a whole season left to play, but that's still a pretty bad start. And to put in perspective just how sort of rare those types of starts are for playoff teams, let's go back to Thanksgiving. And the Preds were 5 points out of a playoff spot on Thanksgiving. That's a big deal. And here's why. Since the 2005-2006 season, the first season after the entire 2005 got wiped out for the lockout, 77% of teams who were in a playoff spot on Thanksgiving made the playoffs. That excludes the 2013 lockout, the 2020 weird season, and the 2021 COVID years. obviously, but that's still the vast majority of teams who are, sort of locked into the top or in the top half of the league make the playoffs. There's not a lot of wiggle room. There's not a lot of time to make up ground as many people think. And a vast majority of those teams that did make it, which I think are 56 out of 240 teams, that made or that were out of a playoff spot on Thanksgiving that made that wound up making the playoffs. There's 56 of those, and the vast majority of them were only 3 points or fewer within that last spot. So it's not like there's just some big ground to make up. It's pretty rare. And again, Nashville was 5 points out. That's outside of the big gap. It's the largest gap at Thanksgiving a team has had to overcome to make the playoffs since the 2019 Blues. They were 6 points out. They got a little bit further away as the season went on, which makes their story incredible. But again, they were really 6 points out on Thanksgiving. The Preds they're 5, so similarities there. When you look at the entire NHL, it is the 4th largest gap a team has had to come back from at Thanksgiving since 2006. Only the 2008 Capitals, who had 9 points, the 2014 Stars, who had 8 points, and the 2019 Blues, who had 6 points, had more ground to make up at Thanksgiving than this year's Nashville Predators. Now, in terms of when you just look at that sort of anomaly, the Thanksgiving anomaly from the Preds standpoint, this is kind of unfamiliar territory for them. Since 2006, they've only been out of a playoff spot on Thanksgiving 5 times. They made it in 3 of those, 2011, 2012, and 2022. And in 2012 and 2022, they were actually tied points-wise with the last team in. The last team in just happened to have, a better tiebreaker or a stronger points percentage, fewer games, whatever have you. And in 2011, they were just 2 points behind that last spot. So it's pretty rare for a Nashville team to be able to overcome this kind of start. This isn't just like, a big in-season story. It's like, oh yeah, the Nashville Predators really turned things around. No, there's historical context for what the Predators doing actually being pretty rare, being kind of an anomaly since, the 2006 season began. And it's even crazy when you sort of break it down into the story of the season. You flash back to the beginning of February. The Preds were dead in the water. You think that 9-2 Dallas game was kind of just the epitome of where the Nashville Predators were as a franchise. You think back and it looked like they were kind of out in the postseason, although they were still points-wise kind of hanging right in the picture. But, there's talk about trading Juuse Saros. There's talk about, sort of breaking up the band. There's talk about, maybe next season sort of being a quote unquote tank season. You had all the speculation about the Nashville Predators just not having a successful year. Everybody was it was never going to happen. Let me make this clear. But you had a lot of people on Facebook that's like, Burnett's not the guy, blah, 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 blah. It was just sort of a disaster piece for the Nashville Predators. And then, the 18-game point streak happens. It puts the Nashville Predators back in it. And even then, after the Nashville Predators sort of slid a little bit in the 7 games since that streak ended, I think a lot of people are like, oh, they're falling back to earth and, they're going to get crushed by a good team in round 1. You look at the numbers and not really. Like, this Nashville Predators team has, I think, been consistent for a very long time. It's you look at the numbers and the, metrics are there, the style of play is there. It's just this Nashville Predators team. It's not just that they're winning scrappy games. because I think that's a big thing that people think of when they think of like the past Nashville Predators is just this scrappy underdog team that just happens to, go on a good run and make the playoffs, against all odds. This Nashville Predators team is playing good hockey, and that's the reason that they're here now. And that is the reason that they've made up all this ground. And I think they absolutely should be considered a dark horse contender for the Stanley Cup going into this postseason. Why? Well, there are three big reasons why that I think the Nashville Predators can contend. And that's the topic of conversation that we will have coming up in just 1 second. First, though, I want to mention today's episode is brought to you by Factor Meals. Guys, sometimes eating healthier is a lot easier said than done. You may have good intentions. You may just get all these fresh ingredients and stuff like that. But then it comes time to actually cook them, and hey, you're too busy. Stuff happens, or you just don't feel like cooking, and you just go for the takeout again. Here's where Factor comes in. Factor delivers fresh, never frozen meals that's chef curated, dietitian approved, and ready to eat in 2 minutes. They deliver it straight to your doorstep. You can choose from weekly menu of 35 options, including popular options like Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or Vegan and Veggie. And you can also discover more than 60 add-ons every week. Things like breakfast, on-the-go lunch, snacks, and beverages to help you stay fueled and feel good all day long. So what are you waiting for? Get started today and fuel up for your springtime goals. If you're looking for gourmet meals, they have meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, truffle butter, broccolini, and asparagus. The best thing that I love about Factor is that they tailor to your schedule. Not only can you customize your weekly meals, but you can also pause, reschedule deliveries, or skip a week. You can also have your delivery shipped whichever day of the week you want, so you can plan your week and your meals ahead of time. And this month, Factor is celebrating Earth Day all month long. So look for the Earth Month Eats badge on the menu to get meals that are the lowest on the carbon footprint scale. So head to factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL and use code LockedOnNHL to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your next box. Again, that's code LockedOnNHL at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box while your subscription is active. All right, friends, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day long? Are you tired of all the endless shouting from Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless and I don't even know, Shannon Sharp is Mike Mad Dog? I don't know. Who knows who's on ESPN anymore? Anyway, if you're tired of turning the volume down because of all the angry shouting, make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so the Nashville Predators are in the playoffs. Here are 3 reasons why I think the Nashville Predators could make a possible cup run, or at least be a dark horse contender. Number 1, the offense. That's a weird thing to start out for a Nashville Predators team, isn't it? But this offense is a wagon. The Nashville Predators this season, 4th in the entire NHL in expected goals for per 60, 2.83. Only the Oilers, Hurricanes, and Devils are higher. Yeah, it's kind of rare to talk about the Nashville Predators as one of the best offenses in the NHL. Am I right? But that's what happens when Filip Forsberg is having a career season. That's what happens when Roman Josi is having his best scoring season since the 2022 season where he had 96 points. It's a lot going right for the Nashville Predators. And as we mentioned, a lot of people have kind of looked at these last 7 games that the Nashville Predators have had this season, this sort of slide that everybody's like up, they peaked too early, they fell back to earth. Look at where they are now. A lot of people think that, maybe those numbers petered out because of that. Not really. In fact, when you look at the last 7 games, their expected goals per 60 rate is actually higher than what it was during that 18-game point streak, generating 4.0 expected goals per 60 in these last 7 games. They're only generating 3.5 during the point streak. So their offense is actually getting better. And you think back to some of the losses, like the 2-0 loss to the Islanders, where they had like 45 shots on goal or something like that. You look back to this Winnipeg loss, overtime loss a couple of days ago, and they absolutely, dominated Winnipeg in terms of possession. They're outplaying the Jets. They generated a lot of offense. They also had nearly 50 shots on goal in that game. They just kind of happened to run into a Connor Hellebuyck wagon. So this Nashville Predators offense, it's not slowing down, nor is it crashing back to earth, nor are they, I guess, sort of performing above what the stats say they should be performing at. No, they've been a consistently solid team when it comes to possessing the puck and generating scoring chances. And that's something that is going to make them a threat in the playoffs. Number 2, the reason that Nashville Predators could make a cup run, this is the simple one. It's goaltending. Since that Dallas game, Juuse Saros, 14-2-3, 920 save percentage, and 9.29 goals saved above expected. 6th in the NHL in that span. Probably would be higher if he actually faced a few more shots like he has in recent years. But 9.29 goals saved above expected in, what's basically about been 20 games or so for him. That averages out to, a stolen win here or there. If the Nashville Predators needed that, like it basically averages to, him taking, a goal, like an entire goal off the board in every other game. That's pretty big. We saw what Juuse Saros did in 2021 versus Carolina. Those Predators had absolutely zero business being in the postseason. And Juuse Saros made it look like the Nashville Predators were step in step with the Carolina Hurricanes. Like that's goaltending is the end all be all in the playoffs. You see what's happened in recent years. Just look last year with Adin Hill and the Vegas Golden Knights and how he, got the Knights even through some of their worst games of the year. You look at Sergei Bobrovsky in Florida, who absolutely steamrolled teams in the first 3 rounds of the Stanley Cup. Goaltending makes a big difference in the postseason, and the Predators right now have one of the hottest goaltenders in the NHL. Somebody that I think a lot of people would consider one of the 5 best goalies in the NHL right now. And when Saros is hot, when he's on, we see the difference he makes, and we see that he's made a difference in the postseason before. So having Juuse Saros, having him healthy and having him ready to go, that is absolutely going to make the Nashville Predators a threat in this postseason, just because we've seen it done by other teams so many times. Goaltending has been the difference in some of these Stanley Cup runs. Number 3, the number 3 reason the Nashville Predators can make a cup run this year is depth. Now, I'm not talking about in depth in terms like Dallas this year. The Stars have 9 players with 50 plus points. I'm not talking about somebody where you just look down and they have like 10 people just scoring, an absurd rate like, Dallas this year or Colorado a couple of years ago. I kind of look at it more like, the Seattle Kraken last year or maybe the St. Louis Blues in 2019, where you have depth in terms of 4 lines and 3 defensive pairs that you can put out there in any situation and are capable of winning their matchups. The Nashville Predators have guys up and down the lineup that they're not afraid to put out in any situation. You look at somebody like Colton Sissons, 35 points this season, very quietly a career high. But you look at what he's done defensively. Most of his starts are in the defensive zone. He's going out there winning faceoffs against other teams' top scoring centers. So yeah, he's got 35 points this season, career high for him. Maybe that doesn't look as impressive as, some people that Dallas have in terms of scoring, but Colton Sissons is capable of going out there and shutting down other teams. So not only are you getting a little bit of a scoring punch, even though it's not as high as, players on other teams, but you're getting scoring punch from a guy who is capable of going out there and stopping other players with a scoring punch. You go back and look at Jeremy Lauzon, the potential NHL hit king. I think a lot of people just, maybe consider him physical stay-at-home defenseman, sort of just, a filler guy in a lot of teams. I think that's how a lot of people looked at him early in his career. Then you look at how Nashville's been using him this year, other than just to, nail people against the boards. He's been out there against other teams' top lines. He's kind of been the shutdown player. Nashville Predators matched him up with Connor McDavid and kind of made Connor McDavid just look like an average player. He had put him up there against Nathan McKinnon, the guy who's probably going to win the Hart Trophy this year, one of the fastest, most skilled skaters in the NHL, and Lauzon was there step for step with him, making it harder for him to have any ground at all. These are the types of players that Nashville Predators have, is guys that you can put out there in any situation, that you're not afraid. It doesn't matter if you're a top line guy or a bottom line guy, you can put them out there and know and trust that they're going to make a difference when they're on the ice. And you combine, the guys like Colton Sissons and Jeremy Lauzon, so many others. I mean, you think of Michael McCarron and what he's done this year. You think of Mark Jankowski, what he's done since he's come back from Milwaukee. Guys like Cole Smith having a career year. Alexander Carrier, I think especially defensively has been lights out since he's been back from, his injury. You combine that with guys like Ryan McDonough, who's having a phenomenal season, and Roman Josi and his improved defense. And you think of that crazy Preds top line. Do you think of guys like Novak and Evangelista starting to get hot, and Jason Zucker starting to get hot? The Preds have 4 lines and 3 pairs that you can put out there against any team in the NHL, and you can be sure that they're going to hold their own. That's going to be huge for the Nashville Predators this year. And that is a big reason why I think the Nashville Predators could be a Stanley Cup threat going into these playoffs. We will end the show with a little tribute to the Arizona Coyotes, having a rough go of it, in social media here lately with news that they could be moving to Salt Lake. As a Predators fan, as somebody who's been through relocation drama before, definitely have some thoughts on this. We'll talk about this coming up in just a second on the Locked On Predators podcast. First, though, I want to mention today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. When you're putting together your fantasy team, you always handpick the best players, right? You always handpick the best forwards available, the best defense available. If you're doing the same for your business, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. You can find top talent fast with Indeed's powerful suite of powerful hiring tools like matching, assessment, and virtual interviews. And if you hate waiting, Indeed's US data shows over 80% of Indeed employees find quality candidates whose resume matches Indeed job descriptions the moment they sponsor a job. Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. And that's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. So visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Again, Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. All right, we will end this show by talking about the Arizona Coyotes situation, or potentially the Salt Lake Coyotes situation. It's an interesting one, especially from the perspective of a Nashville Predators fan, because we went through the relocation drama of 2007, 2008. We know what it's like to kind of have your team up in the balance like that. I'm sure there's a lot of converted Predators fans who are Thrashers fans that are feeling some kind of way right now. So for the Arizona fans out there, I get it. And we're really sorry. So if you haven't heard the situation, there's been a lot of rumblings from people like Elliot Friedman, Chris Johnson, Emily Kaplan, Greg Wazinski, that the NHL is plotting two versions of next year's schedule. One version with the Coyotes at Muller Arena, as they've been, and another version with the Coyotes playing in Salt Lake City. Which would obviously mean that relocation could be an option sooner than we thought. And as somebody pointed out on Twitter, this is kind of what happened with the Jets becoming the Jets via the Atlanta Thrashers, where it's just, we didn't hear anything, and then all of a sudden one day it's like, hey, the NHL is thinking about putting the Thrashers in Winnipeg, just sort of out of nowhere. And then within 2 weeks, it was a done deal. So there is, I think, some strong indication that this is a very strong possibility. If you want full thoughts on this, I suggest you listen to the Locked On Coyotes podcast. Those two really have followed this story well. They've done everything from following all the proposed arenas to the government implications of a move like this. And they just have more details. So if you kind of want more of the ins and outs of the plan, go ahead and listen to Locked On Coyotes. But these are just kind of my thoughts on this. It sucks for Arizona hockey fans, and I can't help but place that those are the people that are being screwed by decades of mismanagement by multiple different owners, multiple different politicians. And I really feel bad for them. I remember a lot of Arizona / Phoenix's, early playoff runs. I think of the late 90s with, when they had Keith Tkachuk and Jeremy Roenick, Rick Tocchet on the roster. I think back to the, sort of the late 2000s, early 2010s, the Mike Smith era, unfortunately the year where they took out the Nashville Predators in 2012, some of those earlier Brisgalov teams, Shane Doan teams. And I remember the playoff runs, and I just remember how crazy packed their arena was and just how loud it was. And, they brought the Sea of White tradition over from Winnipeg and how it just looked like an intimidating place to try and play a hockey game. And, for everybody's like, there, I think I've the best way I would describe it is I would show those games to people that say, oh, people in the desert don't care about hockey. The people in the desert do care about hockey. And not only that, not only do you see sort of, these wild playoff runs where everybody's come out and supported them and we're really excited about the team, but you also look at, the impact of the Coyotes there. The youth programs in Phoenix, Scottsdale, Tempe have just skyrocketed in terms of quality of players, in terms of, development. I mean, Austin Matthews came from there. We know that. Earlier Sean Couturier, Arizona native. So there's obviously good players coming from that region. And it's so I think it's far-fetched to say that nobody in the desert cares about hockey. I just don't think that anybody has really given the Coyotes fans something to cheer for over the past 10 years. You had a pretty good team in the late 90s, early 2000s that was, sort of harmed by then some ownership drama and, moving the team to Glendale and a new arena and, issues like that. You had, a really good team in 2012 before that, a really good couple of years with guys like Ilya Bryzgalov and Shane Doan leading the way and Keith Yandel. You had that team derailed by, ownership drama. The old ownership filed for bankruptcy. NHL on the team for a while. And then they, sold it to the current group who just have not been able to get an arena deal for whatever reason. A lot of people, putting it on, maybe the local government. A lot of people are putting blame on the ownership itself for maybe not dotting the I's and crossing their T's before, everything, on some of these arena deals before it goes before the city. It's just a lot of, I don't know, it's just a lot of mismanagement that is going to harm the people of Arizona in the long run. From a Predators fan, and somebody from, who's Atlanta's right down the street from us in Nashville, it's tough. Yeah, I really feel for the fans because I think there are a lot of really loyal, really dedicated Coyotes fans who are out there, who show up for the team even through some of their worst years, that have dealt with all of this constant drafting some good players, developing exciting prospects just to ship them off 5-6 years later because you're still nowhere where you need to be building wise. Playing in a college arena because you couldn't pay your bills at your NHL sized arena. I feel for the fans because it's not their fault. They're mismanaging the situation. And so, from a business standpoint, yeah, I think it is probably time that the Coyotes move. It just doesn't sound like an arena deal is going to be quick and easy. And I don't think you want them playing in a college arena for another 6, 7, 8 years. I also think you desperately want to avoid a situation like you have with the Oakland A's right now, where just everything is falling apart. And, the I guess like arena negotiations and stadium negotiations just last for so long that, you really have no choice and it just becomes a mess. So from a business standpoint, I get why the NHL wants to go ahead and pull the trigger on a move right now. But I hate it for the fans. And even if this version of the Coyotes move, I still am a believer that maybe hockey in the desert could work again someday. Maybe with different ownership, with a better plan, with a stronger arena deal. I'm holding out hope that maybe if they move to Salt Lake, that hockey will return to the desert someday, because I really believe that fan base will get behind a really, really good team, and you're going to continue seeing that youth program go. So, yeah. Coyotes fans, we're thinking of you in these tough times. On tomorrow's Locked On Predators podcast, Predators with a big doubleheader this weekend. The Chicago Blackhawks are on the schedule, as are the Columbus Blue Jackets. We will have previews for both of those games coming up this weekend on the Locked On Predators podcast. That's going to do it for us on this edition of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Back with an all-new episode tomorrow. We'll see you then.